This week on Supercars Torque, great news for fans of Sydney Motorsport Park, bad news for people running Coke, and the shootout rules are changed to suit Triple Eight. The final draft of the Supercars calendar for the rest of the year has come out, and it's great news if you are a fan of Sydney Motorsport Park, or probably if you live in the Sydney area, because you have got not one, not two, not three, but 4 weekends of action at Sydney Motorsport Park, and then a 2-week break before the guys head off to Bathurst. 4 weeks straight at Sydney Motorsport Park. So I'm not sure what the rules are going to be around that time, whether, people from other states are going to be allowed in, or, we'll see what happens. Things seem to be changing day by day, especially here in Victoria. Not sure what it's like around the rest of the country. I've basically given up watching the news, I'll be honest, but we got 4 weekends at Sydney Motorsport Park. Let's hope that there is some variation in the weekends. They have said they have got the 3 track layouts available to them. There will be some night racing. They do have the hard and soft tyre. Let's hope, fingers crossed, that the final round, the 4th weekend there, will be a 500 kilometre enduro with the co-drivers. We can only assume that the co-drivers can get in there. I don't think there'll be any quarantining or anything for them, so they can just go straight in. They only have to spend the extra, I suppose, week there, because they're going to have to be there for Bathurst anyway. Everyone's there. All the equipment's going to be there for the endurance race. It's probably a bit of extra fuel and a bit of extra planning. How exciting would that be to see a second enduro this year, especially when we've been starved for racing? And that would definitely add a bit of a difference to the final weekend there at Sydney Motorsport Park. I saw a lot of comments about how boring it's going to be, blah, 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 and all this, and, once again, idiots, stick a fork in it, it's done, Don't worry about the rest of the season. Once again, I'd prefer 4 weekends in a row at Sydney Motorsport Park than no racing at all. Sometimes the racing's not the best there, but it's, if they can mix around the tyre compounds and things like that, it could actually work out okay. I'm not going to complain, because we have a roadmap, and we should see some racing for the rest of the year, which I'm very excited about. In other news this week, the super cheap livery for the Feeney and Ingle wildcard was released this week. A lot of people were complaining about how plain it was, blah, 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 and all this. It was funny, Peter Hughes, who designs a lot of these liveries, did come on and fire back at people. I think it was on Facebook, basically saying, I had a brief to follow, blah, 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 kind of thing. Because people don't understand, that the sponsors want certain things. They want the car to look a certain way and that. And sometimes it's not, it might not be the best that you can design. It's, you're given a brief and that's what you have to do. Funny though, I actually thought I preferred the plainer testing livery that they had. I thought, they're starting to get a little bit busy, and I actually really liked that plain bang kind of livery. I did expect kind of more sponsors to come on board. Like I was expecting, Carltex and things like that to be on their boost stickers somewhere. That didn't, a lot of that seemed to be kind of missing. It is basically just a Superjet car. As I said, I kind of preferred the testing livery. So yeah, let me know what you think down in the comments there. Probably is actually the best of the super cheap liveries ever, if we're being honest about it. Other news, Scott Pye has been confirmed at Team 18 for 2 more years. This one, I had heard murmurings that a couple other people were in the frame for his seat. Charlie and Scott have come out and said, pretty much, it was a straightforward thing. So the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle there. It is interesting at the moment, kind of 10 years ago, guys like this probably would have been shuffled aside for the next shiny new thing. And it seems, I'm not sure if it's with the testing restrictions or because it costs so much to run the teams and that now, and the income, that you may be going a bit with a more safe pair of hands. But it seems that there's quite a few guys kind of in that midfield pack that just keep getting contracts. And, you know, there's no really now, Scott Pye's not going to go and win a championship. You watch after, you know, I said, at the start of the year, Winterbottom was kind of over it, and yeah, he's dominated Pye most of the year. But Pye's not really going to win a championship, and you start, you know, should you be investing in him for a long term? Who else do you replace him with in that? But there seems to be, you know, kind of in that mid-pack there is a lot of these kind of, I suppose, middlemen that are just locked in that, you know, middle of the road kind of results where they get really excited if they get top 10, top 5s and things like that. Yeah, it's, you know, it's not a bad thing getting those results, but, you know, is that what you're out there to achieve? The rules for the top 10 shootout have been changed since Shane Van Gisbergen was disadvantaged at Townsville. Disadvantaged. And a one-off thing happened, and now we need to put a rule in place for it. Situations like this should be a little bit of common sense, I think. Do we really need a rule? If this happens, blah, 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 and you can go into the pits and do this and this, but you aren't allowed to do that. No, on it goes kind of thing. I think some of the rulebook stuff like this, you know, a simple logical approach should be taken rather than, you know, bringing in a new rule for every little event that might or possibly has happened in the past, and that, because I can imagine, like, reading through the rule book, it would just be endless now, and you get to the point where, you know, Neil Crompton that don't know what's going on. How's, you know, the average fan supposed to know what the rules are? There was an interesting little story come out this week. TCM, that's probably now going to be part of the Supercars again next year because of the whole ARG buyout thing. Won't get into that right now. But they've had low car counts recently, which COVID probably hasn't helped. But they're looking to some way of bolstering up the field, and they're suggesting they want some Group N cars in the field. So anyway, Group N is essentially your historic race cars with no modifications, and that was essentially what TCM started out to be, but you could make some niceties to the car to make it, you know, a little bit more reliable, a little bit safer, whereas Group N has to run as it did in the, I think, in the 60s or 70s. So you've got your drum brakes and things like that. I'm not sure if they have roll cages. They'd have to have roll cages, I'd imagine, but the TCM guys were essentially, you could put disc brakes in it to make it a bit safer. You could put a newer gearbox in it for reliability and things like that. But now you've got to the point where essentially guys like, you know, Steve Johnson's XD Falcon, it's a V8 supercar. Yeah, it's not a gentleman racer category anymore. So now we're talking about bringing back the original cars. Well, if you didn't let the rules get out of hand, you wouldn't have to come back to kind of where the original. Then you go, once again, I went down the comments section. I wonder why I do it sometimes. But lots of comments then about, oh, it's not fair, the guys running Group N because they couldn't win the race, blah, 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 and all this. And, you know, they all should be running to the same set of rules and everyone should have the same chance of winning. These are probably the same people who complain that, you know, the supercars are all essentially the same car and, you know, there's no difference between them and, you know, anyone could win a race and you should be able to do whatever you want and blah, blah, blah. So once again, it seems you can't make a motorsport fan happy. We all have issues with everything, and yeah, don't go into the Facebook comments because you just shoot yourself in the head basically doing it. The final little thing this week, ex-supercar driver Wayne Wakefield got himself into a spot of bother. taking a little leaf out of McCullough Jones, Chris Pither's book, and thought I'll get in on this Coke money, but not the Coca-Cola that you drink, the Coke. I've been watching Queen of the South, so I know all about what goes on here. He got caught with 106 kilos of it. Okay, so I've been watching Queen of the South. It's a Netflix show that's Mexican kind of based, and they buy a ton of this stuff. And on the show, I'm not sure if these are real figures and that what it costs, but they buy a ton of it for $3 million. So, using that logic, he was cruising around with $300,000 worth of powder in the car, which that's some pretty serious stuff. And I'd imagine that if you're buying it like in a ton from Colombia, you're going to get a bit better deal than like 100 kilos of it in Australia is probably worth a lot more. They didn't get into specifics of what it was worth, but that's mind-numbing figures. But this also, Wayne Wakefield was an odd one. He kind of came from some state-level club racing stuff back in I think it was the mid-90s, and then he kind of rose up, and all of a sudden he actually, when Marcus Ambrose was on pole at Bathurst, I think it was 2001, he was actually Marcus's co-driver at the time, and he'd won some of the Konica V8 lights or whatever at the time, the Super 2 races in that period, and then all of a sudden he just disappeared off the face of the earth. I was a bit younger at the time, so you probably didn't follow, some guy just disappears off. But you wonder if some of this stuff was going on back then, and maybe that's why his career didn't kind of continue and he didn't get a main game drive, because of the way he kind of rose up the ranks. He did do some super touring as well. He seemed to be quite competitive and whatever, but off he went. So maybe there was some going on back in those days. But that's it for this week. I've got some exciting little videos coming up. Not interviewing someone like Glenn Seaton, but some people who are actually quite famous in their own little field of expertise, let's say. They'll be coming out later on in the week. I've already recorded a couple. Got a few more lined up. I'm going to try and line up some more as well, and try and get those out on Thursdays, so keep an eye out for them. But until next time, I'm still Dave, and I'll catch you later.